All right, welcome back to Bills training camp. Training camp will actually be wrapping up on Thursday, but today, one of the observations we'll go with right off the bat is just the heat. It has been very hot here in Orchard Park. We know the Bills players have been trying to deal with it. I will say the reporters trying to deal with it as well. But this is something this team has talked about, how important it is just to get ready for the season. They're going to be in Miami week 2. This is something that the Bills need to keep on top of. And look, they could very easily be inside for practices. We know that they have the beautiful facility, but the Bills staying out there. We saw some guys leaving the field with cramps. But just in general, this is a type of situation that Buffalo needs to get prepared for and ready for. So you saw that here today. Another observation that kind of jumped out to me is just the injuries that we've seen on this team so far. Look, we're heading into preseason game number 3. Do we think Josh Allen will be playing on Saturday? I personally do not, because of the injuries that we've seen. Isaiah McKenzie leaving practice on Tuesday after dealing with a shoulder injury. We did see him at practice today. He was on the sidelines. He had a sling on his left shoulder. He was in a bucket hat. So we don't know the status of his injury, what that will be moving forward. We do know he had an MRI last night, but again, we're not sure the status of that. But he is also wearing a sling. Then we saw some of the guys from the Bills secondary. Levi Wallace was out of practice yet again today. That is for an undisclosed injury. Taron Johnson had a wrap on his wrist coming out of practice. He did not practice as well today. That's just something to monitor. Now, there were some good things. Stephon Diggs has been back to practice. He had been dealing with that knee injury. He looks great. You saw the command that he had. He didn't seem like he was hindered in any way. He was moving out of his breaks, getting in and out of cuts, something you want to see as the Bills obviously getting closer to that regular season. Emanuel Sanders, another guy that kind of got a little dinged up earlier on in training camp. He seemed to be moving well as well. And Isaiah Hodgins, so a different Isaiah, not Isaiah McKenzie, but Isaiah Hodgins, is a guy that's been a really interesting prospect when you look at him, because he was drafted last year by the Bills and he had to sit out. He basically had a redshirt year last year because of an injury. He was on IR. Once again, he looked like he was having a pretty good camp so far earlier this summer, had an injury, but he's someone that was back out on the field today doing a little bit of individual work. He seemed to be moving pretty well as well. But these injuries are something that we need to monitor. You know, as we get through this season, this preseason, the regular season is not slowing down. I know a lot of people very excited for that game against the Steelers, but it's just something to watch out for. And I think the Bills are at this point, you know, the Bills did sign a receiver yesterday, Steven Sims, another guy trying to bring in reinforcements, because Isaiah, when you think about it, McKenzie is also taking punts. So there's things like that, kick returns. So you have to be aware of, you know, what that means for the Bills as they get closer to the regular season. So that was something that I noticed today. Also, something I noticed today, Zack Moss. You know, we talked so much, and Devin Singletary looked great in that game against the Bears early last week, but Zack Moss is someone that I felt like he was really hitting his stride at the end of last year. He's running back. He came in. We know the Bills used back-to-back picks in 2 years, taking a Devin Singletary, then taking Zack Moss. And these guys are competing against one another. We know the Bills' offense is obviously going through the air. We know that. The running game is a complement to the passing offense. But at the same time, we don't know coming into this year who would be getting the majority of carries. Now, Brian Daboll seems like it would be almost like a type of committee, run by committee type of situation. But Zack Moss is someone I think, because of his injury history, is someone that maybe right now hasn't been talked about as much. He had the ankle injury at the end of last year in the playoffs that ended his season early. He had a hamstring injury earlier on this camp. He got back to work, back out on the field against the Bears. He looked pretty sharp as well. He had a touchdown, almost had a touchdown, should have been a touchdown against the Bears. But that's someone that, you know, we got to talk to him today after practice, and he just spoke about how he's knocking off the rust right now. And that's why he's really looking forward to this third preseason game, just to knock off that rust. We talked to him a couple weeks ago. He was like, I just want to get hit. I want that contact. I want to be able to feel like myself again. And this is a throwback, but Mike Catalan and I were in Indy for the Combine last year before like the world shut down. And we talked to Zack Moss, and he spoke about how players in college made a business decision not to tackle him because he was kind of a bull out there. So I think he's a guy as a running back too that revels in that physicality. So that's someone that is really looking forward to getting these reps, because his preseason so far has been kind of limited because of that hamstring injury, and then his offseason was limited because of that ankle issue. So that's someone that we got to talk to today, and that made it pretty interesting considering he's a guy that, Devin Singletary looks great against the Bears, but that's also someone, of course, to keep an eye on because that competition we know is a battle. And here's something interesting I learned today. I didn't know this, but Devin Singletary and Zack Moss actually knew each other in high school. So they go way back. So they know exactly who they're competing against. And we got to talk to Moss, and he just spoke about, look, I want to play well, of course, but it's really about whatever makes the Bills better. So you can tell that there is that camaraderie aspect in terms of that. Another thing that we talked to Brian Dable today, and he was asked about the backup QB battle. Look, we know it's Josh. We know it's Mitch Trubisky after he lit up his former team. But the competition between Davis Webb and Jake Fromm. And Brian Dable said it is very much still a competition. Look, will the Bills carry 4 quarterbacks on their roster? That's a decision that we're going to see as roster cuts are very much right around the corner. But Brian Dable was asked today, look, last season, Jake Fromm was their quarantine quarterback. He was the guy that was isolated from the team. And we've seen with COVID outbreaks on other teams, even with the Bills, that it can kind of affect a position group. So will the Bills want to keep 4, or are they going to cut it down to 3? That's something we need to look at. But today, Davis Webb did have a pretty not great picked off pass. Jake Fromm, just something to know, practice had wrapped up, and it had been wrapped up for a while, and Jake Fromm and Mitch Trubisky were still out doing work on the field. So they stayed after practice for quite a while. So you can glean from that what you will. But just something to monitor because, like I said, those cuts are right around the corner. And I feel like at this point in the season, it's a decision that the Bills will have to make in terms of, do they want to keep 3? Do they want to keep 4 quarterbacks? Do they need to isolate someone like they did last season? And I say that too because another observation I had from practice today was AJ Klein and Matt Milano were back out on the field. Now, they were a part of the COVID situation scare, I'll call it, Tuesday in Orchard Park because, as we know, 4 players, including Cole Beasley, had to be quarantined, isolated from the team because of a Bills trainer testing positive for COVID. We saw 2 receivers. It was Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis, and 2 defensive linemen in Vernon Butler and another player. And I think that that's something that we need to look at because that affects how the Bills, in terms of what they do for other position groups, because we've seen it kind of affect position groups as we go through. So, but something to note though, AJ Klein, Matt Milano, back to practice. And you want to see that, of course. So those guys not having to isolate after the NFL deemed them as not close contacts with that Bills trainer. And the 4th player who had to isolate from the Bills is really just eluding me right now. And I know as soon as I turn off the camera, I'm going to remember. So bear with me here. But those were my observations from today. Like, again, it's hot out here. It's been a hot practice. The Bills doing a bit of 11-on-11 work. But, again, they're getting ready for their preseason game, the finale against the Packers. I don't think Josh Allen will be playing. And I think a reason for that is the injuries. And the Bills want to preserve as much as they can going in. So we shall see. Be sure to subscribe to the Buffalo Plus channel. We actually also have an Instagram page as well if you want to follow us there. And then be sure to check out our Twitter, Mike Catalana, Dan Fates, Jenna Cottrell. We all have our own Twitters. And thank you so much for sticking with me. I appreciate it. It's really hot. My brain feels really scattered right now. But it was a good day of practice as the Bills get one day closer to facing off against the Packers here on Saturday. For now, with the Bills, be sure to check out buffaloplus.com and like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll catch you next time.